Okay. Hello, everyone, and good evening. We had some technical difficulties. Does anyone have any duct tape? I'm not going to stand right in front of the microphone. Okay. How are we operating the presentation?
You need to stay away from this camera right here. And I'll change your state.
Okay, thank you. If you'll just change that side. I'm Doug Grabenick, city engineer from Manitou Springs. I recognize many of you from our previous meeting, so welcome. We're glad you're here. This will follow a similar format as our previous meetings have. We'll go over some introductions, the effort we've put towards community engagement thus far. I do want to avoid that microphone or that speaker. I hear a lot. Community responses to the site alternatives and building layouts. So we're going to go through some of the major feedback we received when we shared all the different 8 layouts from the previous meeting. There were some universal themes that we heard, so we just kind of want to share those with you. And then we took all that information, boiled it down, and came up with what we're calling the draft preferred plan. And that seems to be, I don't know how to say it, but it's like the most compromised version of the site layout that we could find. How is that? Basically, there's a lot of individual interests varying in different ways. And so what we tried to do was to come up with the one that we felt like really met the community's needs most efficiently and without any of those deal breakers that we've talked about in the past, something that was unsafe or wouldn't work for the community. We'll go over some of the responses we heard, and then we're going to kind of lead you through what our next steps look like going forward after tonight's meeting. If you'll yeah. Okay, welcome. Done that. Okay, so for those that have been around for a while, I really like this phrase. So what is the project purpose? Like, why are we here? And just bear with me as I read it to you. To investigate and implement the rehabilitation of historic aspects of Hiawatha Gardens with the goal to establish it for community use. So that was a big, really guiding principle for how we got here today, was how could this building be used to help honor and provide for community use. That's I think a concept that everyone has agreed to from day one. And then to continue, including but not limited to a multimodal transportation hub. Okay, so that's kind of really what we got here. That was kind of our guiding principle. And then if you'll change slides for me. Thank you. Okay, what were our goals? So we had the principle. What were our goals? We wanted to be accessible to anyone and everyone, make sure that the site was safe, that we embraced the creativity that our community can offer, that we honored the natural area and its aesthetic. Everyone knows we talk about traffic every 5 minutes in Manitou, and how could this site also, respect traffic and the busyness that it has in the area, and then also multimodal stuff. And, if you guys have been out there recently, we actually have some kind of unique features out there. We have, I'm kind of skipping around, but while I'm talking about transportation we have a bike ride out there now where you can go and rent a bike. We have someone where you can rent an e-bike, and we even have the rickshaws that will come and pick you up and take you through town. That didn't exist like 5 months ago, and that's here now. So Joan's happy. We want to be sustainable. We want to make sure that we're smart with our money, but that we are respectful to the environment, to rehabilitate the building, and then to make sure that we're having an eye for the future and in our design and our concepts, and we're not doing something that as soon as we cut the ribbon, we're already kind of outdated, and we don't have shag carpet out there because it's not coming back. One more, and then we'll introduce. I thought we had the introduction slide. Real quick, before I go through this, I do want to introduce the team to everyone real quick, and it's just easier if I let you introduce yourselves. So Nancy.
Oh, I'll just yell. Nancy Fortune, I'm the timekeeper tonight, but I'm on the task force.
Susan Watkins, Task Force. Jennifer Davis, BDH Architecture.
Josh Minner with DHM Design.
Oh, Bill.
Bill Kramer, Task Force.
Task Force, and I saw Carl.
Carl Stein.
And
Nichols Task Force.
Josiah Task Force.
Roy.
Roy Katie.
And Emily.
Oh, Emily, God, don't forget Emily.
And it's good that Emily was last because she pretty much helped to put this all together with Susan. So thank you, Emily. Okay, so what things have happened thus far since we got here? This camera I don't need to go in front of, right? Okay, I'm just going to work this out of the room a little bit so you guys can all turn this way awkwardly, especially here up front. Okay, so these are things that we've all done already. You can see kind of our progress, back in October of 2020. It was identified for a building for community use. There's that term again, and then for mobility hub. We continued to do evaluation. Project management is challenging, as we all know, because you get into one step and then all of a sudden something else happens and something else happens and something else happens and you don't know about those yet. So, it's funny that just shortly thereafter, we have to go and evaluate the structural integrity of the building, even though it had already been deemed. But that's the challenge of the project. That's why we're here, as we work through all these things. So as we work our way through, we're down approximately to where that arrow is, the June, August timeframe, obviously. And here we are looking to get some feedback on our draft preferred plan from all of you. We hope to then take all that information, compile it, and then get a draft preferred plan from all of you, and then eventually refine that, get some additional drawings, and then potentially take that to council for their approval and go from there. And then we're not to this phases yet, but yeah, go ahead. Thank you. This is kind of our next steps here going forward. We'll get to I just called it draft preferred, but you know what I mean. And then look to create that final plan with the site layouts, and then continue on in early 2023, work towards final community and city council review and approval of the plan. Now, tonight is really not going to be about some of the specifics of the building. Like, we're not yet talking about building colors or architectural styles or what kind of faucets we're going to have in the bathrooms. It's really to focus on the layouts, where bathrooms can be, the size of the space for the community, some of the amenities of the community. There will be bike lockers or bike amenities someday, but tonight's not really the time for us, because those can be installed almost anywhere on the concrete plaza type thing. So tonight's really to focus on, how do we want the building layout? How do we want it to function? What kind of basic amenities and features do we want with it? Okay. And then I think, keep going. I get to hand it off. Susan.
Thank you, Joel. How many of you were here with us in March when we looked at all those different ideas, all the what ifs? Great. So we have some new folks. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to spend just a minute or two kind of recapping how we've gotten to this point, how community residents have been involved in the decisions that have been made to this point. So the city purchased a property in 2016. In 2017, the first of 3 Hiawatha Gardens task forces was formed, and they started talking about the future of Hiawatha Gardens. Then in 2018, a second task force was formed to replace the first task force. Don't ask me why, but that's what happened. And the second task force decided they would reach out to the community to find out what the community thought about Hiawatha Gardens. So the community engagement really initiated in 2018 with a community open house right in this very room, when we asked people what they were excited about when it came to Hiawatha Gardens and what they were concerned about. We got lots and lots of great ideas. We took all of those ideas that were generated from the community and formed a list of 14 different potential uses of the Hiawatha Gardens site. Then in November of that year, we had a community workshop and said, please take a look at all these potential uses and tell us which ones you like first or best. So people rated those 14 so we could get a feel for what people were really interested in. We did the same list through an online email survey that was open to everybody in January of that year. So we collected lots and lots of responses about what people wanted at the site. Then in September 2021, shortly after the non-historic portions of the dance hall building had been demolished and that we had confirmed that the building that remained was structurally sound and would make a good public investment. The Task Force 3 hosted community tours so that people could see firsthand what kind of shape that building was in and what architectural historic features were still in the building. Excuse me. Then our most recent step was some of you participated in the March meetings where we brought a whole bunch of ideas to you and said, what do you think? So far we've collected probably over 300 individual responses from people. We've had lots of people engaged. We've heard, next slide, please. Lots of different great stuff. Some people said, make it an art center, make the dance hall building an art center. Some people said, make it a music venue again, like it used to be. Others said it's an old nasty building, tear it down and make the whole thing a parking lot. Others said, restore the building. It's our history. We need to keep it. Put it back in the historic district the way it was before. The overriding message, though, that we got over and over and over again was this building would be great for some sort of community use. We don't know what community use yet, but it would be great for this community to have access to that building. So, next slide, please. In March, we presented to those of you who attended 4 site alternatives and 8 different building design options. And this was kind of a, what if we did this meeting? No decisions had been made. We just took all the ideas that we'd gathered from the community and developed these 12 different options and asked you what you thought about them. So I'll just take a minute to recap the site alternatives. I won't go into them in detail, but just kind of recap for those of you who weren't here. Next slide, please. So 3 of the 4 site alternatives had an adjacent restroom building either north or northwest of the building. And the building, can you see, is the big orange square. That's the existing Hiawatha Gardens Dance Hall building. So 3 had adjacent restroom buildings, north or northwest. 1 had it to the southwest. 2 of the alternatives had a large public plaza to the west of the dance hall building. See that kind of gray area? That was a large public plaza. 1 had a small plaza to the north of the building, and 1 of the alternatives had no plaza at all. 2 of the alternatives had the main vehicle entrance from El Paso Boulevard up in the northwest or northeast corner of the property. And an additional sort of optional northwest entry up in the northwest corner. 2 had El Paso Boulevard as an entry and exit point, as well as the southwest entrance coming off Old Man's Trail down in the southwest corner of the property. Next slide, please. The parking stalls on the alternatives range from 137 to 144. All included 5 handicap accessible sites or slots. And all of the alternatives included things like bike racks and lockers and those types of amenities. So what did you tell us in March about those alternatives? Next slide, please.
Next one again.
Yes, please.
Sorry.
That's all right. Whoops, nope, sorry, can you go back? There we go. Okay, thank you. Lots of support for that large public plaza. The 2 alternatives had the large plaza to the west, kind of gray area with the trees around it. Lots and lots of support. People really like that as an amenity on site. Significant dislike for having a vehicular entrance on the southwest corner. People were really afraid of pedestrian car conflicts and said that just wouldn't be safe to have that because you'd have people coming up from the trail, you'd have people pulling in with their cars, you'd have people getting off the bus, you'd have all kinds of potential interactions. So people said, don't put an entrance there. The Parking and Mobility Advisory Board for the city said they were interested in the alternatives that really maximize people using all forms of transportation, being able to get in to the site and circulate around the site. And when I talk about all forms, I'm talking about not just cars and pedestrians, we're talking about bicycles, electric bicycles, skateboards, any way you can travel. This site is supposed to be adaptable to. So next slide, please. These were the 8 different building alternatives, the building option layouts that were presented in March. Next slide, please. And real briefly, 4 of the layouts, 4 of the 8, had the restroom building southwest of the dance hall, kind of down in that southwest corner. You can see on the top layout a little square there. 3 had restrooms to the north, as you see in that bottom drawing, north of the dance hall that were connected by a breezeway. We had asked people what they thought about moving the city parking office to the Hiawatha Gardens site and gave them 3 options to respond to that. And I'll tell you what they said in a minute. But one of the options had the parking office in an adjacent building, not in the dance hall building. And one option located the parking office in the dance hall itself. So it was in the dance hall building. 7 options had a covered patio on the south end of the dance hall. You see at the bottom, the very south end was a covered patio. 1 did not have a patio included. All 8 options had a warming kitchen and storage inside the dance hall. And the occupancy ranged from accommodating 429 people to 920 people in the dance hall building. Next slide, please. So what'd you tell us? People really liked the layouts that had the restrooms north of the dance hall building. They were not at all supportive. You were not at all supportive of having the restrooms to the southwest. You didn't like the fact that it blocked the views to the creek, and it kind of blocked or complicated the access to the creek. So people said, don't put restrooms down there, put them to the north. So that was a really strong message we got. Yeah, next slide, please. People landed on a range of about between 500 and 760 people for maximum occupancy. We're pretty much split. About 35% of the people said make it 500, about 35% said make it 760. So we ended up with that range. There was a strong majority of people who really liked the idea of having the city parking offices on site for a variety of reasons. You know, it would allow a set of eyes on the property for many hours of the day. So there was a broad support for having it, but of that, almost 80%, nearly 60% said, don't put the offices in the dance hall building, leave that for community use, put the city offices in a building adjacent to the dance hall building. So again, real strong, clear message on that. Next slide, please. We also ask on the individual questionnaire that we had people complete, we were interested in how people envisioned using this space at Hiawatha Gardens, the dance hall building. So we gave people a list of potential uses and asked them to indicate which uses they preferred. And as you can see there's a long list of potential uses that garnered quite a bit of support. Ranging from musical performances down to city council meetings. So we got good guidance there on how people are interested in using the building. Next slide, please. There are also some other themes that we heard from our responses, and that is, we like the idea of a mobility hub, and we like that it should be open and usable and user-friendly for both local people and for tourists. So make sure the design accommodates both. We want a community focus and we want an arts focus on how that building is used. The creek is right there. The design should really make great use and highlight the proximity to the creek. That was a really strong theme that we heard. Also, when you're looking at design, make sure that you minimize safety issues, because there are going to be a lot of people, a lot of moving parts, people in cars, people on bicycles, people walking, people on skateboards. That's what we hope will happen. And there's a lot of chance for conflict. So make sure you incorporate those safety precautions in your design. Also, obviously, this is Manitou Springs and landscaping is a priority. So people said over and over again, this needs to incorporate green space and not just be an asphalt parking lot. And inevitably, management issues are going to come up, and you can kind of predict for a large public space what those might be. So people said plan ahead to address management issues like loitering and trash and vandalism, and pay attention to the surface runoff you're creating off that site into the creek. Use permeable surfaces or do something, but let's not damage the creek through the use of the site. And then next slide, please. Finally, we asked people at the March meetings, give us your ideas about how we can make Hiawatha Gardens feel like Manitou, the Manitou feel, which is really hard to define. So people generated a lot of ideas that we will incorporate. This is a creative place. Focus on creativity of Manitou and art and all of the things that make us wonderful. Hiawatha Gardens has a significant history. Tell that history, incorporate history into the design and to the information we get. We love pollinator gardens. We value the environment and ecology. So do pollinator gardens, low maintenance, planting beds, have seating areas next to planters, those kinds of things. We love our dogs. So make this site friendly to our dogs too. Have water, have stations for dog stuff. And make this community center an intergenerational gathering place. Make it for all people and serving a wide range of needs. And then finally, make sustainable choices when you design this and when you build this. Consider solar, consider all kinds of sustainability practices in your design. So that's what we've heard. I'll be quiet now and tell you, Jennifer and Josh are going to present the draft preferred plan. And the way that came about is the task force and BVH studied all the responses in depth that we got from you all in March and said, what are the common themes? What did people like? What did they not like? And as a result of that, BVH and the task force developed this plan that Jennifer and Josh will present to you now.
Okay, let me know if you can hear me with my mask on. Sounds like it. Again, I'm Jennifer with BVH Architecture. Thank you guys for coming out tonight. I will mention on your tables are the draft preferred plan. So you've got a copy of what we're going to show you really quickly or coming up. And then you also have a phase 1 report that's a thicker package. And that's all the responses that we got online, that we got in writing. So that's all how we did our recap if you want to dig into how we got to the plans that we're showing you tonight. Since March, BVH and DHM have been working on the draft proposed plan. Oh, actually, would you go to the next slide? Thank you. One more. Our task since March has been to provide one floor plan, so that's the building layout, and then at least one site alternative. So that's what we've been tasked with. The considerations, again, these were kind of our marching orders out of the responses that we got. And thank you for your feedback because it was clear. I wasn't sure how we were going to get from 8 plans to 1, but y'all helped us out a lot. So our task was move those restrooms away from the creek. No one liked that. We moved them to the north. Move forward with the large plaza on the west. So that was out of community feedback from this group and then also from the parking board. From what's the map? Mobility and parking. Thank y'all. We have heard that 2 entrances and exits would be preferred, just so no one's stuck in this parking lot. Getting in and out is a little bit easier. And then locate the parking offices on site, but not in the dance hall footprint. So what you're seeing here is kind of the parts and pieces that we were working with. The dance hall is the larger image. We knew we wanted that warming kitchen to keep that in there. We knew we needed storage. And then on the top, kind of going off the screen, are the parking offices, an option for that layout to hold 3 or 4 people, and an office and some storage, and then restrooms for both a men's and a women's, and then some single toilet rooms are what you're seeing there. Okay, I'm gonna let Josh talk about the site plan.
All right. I feel kind of lucky to show you guys the pretty version here. So I'm going to talk mostly about the site itself, and I'll let Jennifer speak to the building after, but we're going to kind of move, just so everyone's oriented here. I'm going to move from the top right where you see this, the northeast entrance, and I'll kind of make my way over as I'm talking through this. And the reason we want to do that is because with this site plan, this draft preferred plan, we were looking at the main vehicle entry being accessed from El Paso Boulevard to the northeast. And so with that, all of the circulation for the cars and vehicles begins to move sort of into the site. We're looking at 2-way drive aisles with your kind of standard front end 90-degree angle parking. You can kind of see just to the south of the entrance there is a landscape island. And so through some of the feedback we had heard from the last meeting in March and some of the site alternatives we had presented, we had looked at sort of the positives and the negatives of the landscape islands. And so one of the reasons we decided to keep one of these actually in is to help with some of the drainage on site. As you can see, there are some contour lines on these plans, but essentially a lot of the water that moves on site currently is moving towards the building. And so we figured these landscape islands, and you can see where the trees are kind of at the top and the bottom of all the parking rows as well, are good opportunities to capture some of that water runoff. And so moving kind of towards the left of the screen, we have accessible parking where the little A's and V's are in the top left corner. And then just above that, I know it's a little bit hard to see here, but we have identified a location for electric vehicle charging stations as well, which is those little green dots you can see on your plans. And so really, like we heard from you guys in March, was to emphasize some of those accessible goals, as well as making sure we're accomplishing, sort of some of that multimodal, be it, electric vehicles and things like that. As we move a little bit more towards the southwest here, you can see we have the proposed plaza. We do want to, be clear here that the plaza has not been designed yet. We have some ideas based on the feedback we received from you guys about what kind of amenities could be in that space. And so we heard things as far as providing shade, or even maybe a shade structure, having seating for folks, any sort of opportunities for public art installations, which really ties with the character of Manitou. And then just pollinator gardens, planters, trees, any way we can green up this space and really make it inviting for people to want to hang out. And so this will be looked at more in the future as we move along through this design, but just wanted to kind of give the bigger picture so far of what we're thinking for that, that community space. Lastly, we'll talk a little bit about the multimodal as far as different types of transportation other than vehicles. And so you can see on the plans here, we have identified a few areas where you would have both bike lockers for storage, that would be bike racks. And we were thinking that, with the bike ride that exists there on site today, this would be an opportunity to sort of combine those uses and really strengthen this as a a little bit of a hub that people could use to access the site via walking or bike or any other different type of transportation other than vehicles. And really, as you kind of move through that plaza space, you can see some of those elements have been incorporated, and those can certainly be looked at a bit more as we move through and hear more feedback from everybody about, where those amenities should actually be located. I think that's a good overview of the site. I will touch quickly upon the fact that we're looking at 136 parking stalls. So that's more than exists today. 123 of those would be standard vehicle parking stalls. There would be 5 accessible, as Susan mentioned earlier, and then potentially 8 charging stations for electric vehicles. I think I will pass it back to Jennifer. Actually, I think there's, well, let me go to the next slide. Yeah, we have more pretty pictures. So these are a couple views that kind of illustrate that idea as well, just going from the plan view to more of a 3D so folks can get an understanding of what this could start to look like. So the image on the left is looking kind of from the north towards the south. And so Manitou Avenue would be kind of in the background there. And so you can see the existing Hiawatha Gardens building with the new addition kind of in the foreground. You can see the accessible parking stalls just to the center right there. And then that big plaza space. And again, at this point, we're really just showing ideas of what could be as far as planters and shade and trees, just to give the idea of what this space could look like. These will certainly be looked at more in future phases. And then looking at the image on the right, sort of the opposite view, looking from the northeast down to the southwest, so you can get a better idea of what those parking areas look like. And so you can see that landscape island in the middle there, all of the standard front end parking stalls, and then, vegetation that would incorporate with that as well. So now I will pass it, Jennifer.
Thank you. We do have to fact check some things live. For the parking spots, you could go to the next slide. Thank you. Parking spots, we're not providing any more than exists currently, but we're in the same ballpark of what's there, which is great because we get the plaza amenity and maintain a large number of parking spots. Looking at the building in a little bit more detail in the plaza, since we're putting the restrooms to the north, you kind of see the darker building to the north. We're thinking that we're going to use Manitou greenstone on that building. So this is just an idea of what it might look like. The original dance hall was in a stucco material, so we'll keep that and bring that back on the exterior walls and add a lot of windows that were similar to how they looked in the late 20s. But then you can see on the right-hand side of the picture is the patio that we're creating under the existing roof line and facing out to the creek. Next slide. And on the floor plan, this is also on your tables if you want to look at it a little bit closer, but we've maintained the warming kitchen. Don't want to hurt your ears. Okay, so in this bar on the north is just enlarged of this portion. So that's the stone addition that we're wanting to put to the north, since we had the feedback of that's the place where it fits the best, and it honestly made the nicest plaza. We did look at what would this bathroom configuration look like if it was a little to the northwest, and it was not a great plaza configuration. So worked out this this layout. So this would serve, it can serve up to 720 occupants. And we've got 150 seats shown right now. The dance hall, this warming kitchen here, and then storage, and then the connection to the breezeway would be within that footprint that exists today, but connecting everyone to the restrooms. And the restrooms in this middle section would be open. Typically, we're thinking that those would be open when the parking offices are open, But then the family rooms, the family restrooms here could be open essentially 24/7 if you wanted them to be. And then those could serve folks that are actually just using the parking lot and the shuttle stops. So you have those options of locking down the building a little bit more securely for off hours or evening hours. And then having those single toilet rooms on the left. And those could be, all gender, they'd be wheelchair accessible. However, we want to label them, but open for the general public and also for building use, but people would have to go outside to get to those. Any questions on that? We also, I didn't mention, we do have a green room, which some folks did. It could be a green room, it could be a welcoming area, but a place for if you're having a speaker that needs to have some preparation time before they speak, they can be in there. I call it a green room, typically at concerts, that's where the band's hanging out beforehand. So we do have that option there. It could honestly be another storage space, but we do have that capacity and it fit pretty nicely on our site plan. So we've added room for that. Okay, that's great. Thank you. The next steps for our design team is actually to increase the size of our design team. So far, it's been BVH architecture, DHM design. So we've been mostly focused on the plan that you're seeing, the site plan and the building layouts. But over the next few months, we'll be bringing on civil to look at drainage. We'll be bringing on a landscape architect to look at that drainage, the planting, where we want beds, where we want seating. So a lot more development will be happening in the coming months. We also need to bring mechanical, electrical, plumbing to look at the services for the building. And then continuing to work with DHM on the layout that we're moving forward with. We also do need to talk to City Council and get this draft preferred plan approved. And hopefully we've got your blessing and your comments to move forward into the next phase. We're also going to work with State Historic Preservation Office for that we're moving along within their guidelines. That's all I'll say about that. But we do want to make sure that we're coordinating with them, already having conversations. And they did a grant proposal was part of this project already. So we're working in line with them. And then also the site was recently incorporated into the historic district. So we'll make sure that our plans moving forward meet those guidelines as well. So we have a lot to do, but I feel like we have a good starting place. And, it's really nice for us that we, again, went from those 8 plans to 1. So we're open and want to hear your feedback too. Did we make good progress since the last time we've all been together? And did we hear your comments? I will also say that some of the items for the Manitou character, and as we've spoke, the plaza hasn't been designed yet in, the detail that we'll need to get that to, but also, where do we put sculpture? Where do we put murals? Do we have all the dogs in Manitou? Do we have places for them and all the community members to have places in the plaza and in the building that are flexible enough, but also injecting that character into the building? And what we've shown you in 3D, the elevations, like we'll certainly be developing those more along the restrooms. That will be developed further to inject a little bit more of that character and actually like bring that building to life. So thank you. Next one. Okay, your responses. Yeah, are there questions? I'll start over here.
Note number 2 on your main drawing
Yes.
talks about a traffic study. Has that been done yet?
No, we haven't done traffic studies. I know.
So if you go from 8 and you have 2 or 3 different
Mhm.
You haven't done any studies, but yet you pick one that I live above and watch all the time.
Mhm.
It doesn't work now, and now you're gonna have an in and out. So I'm just wondering what happens when the study comes back and says, because if it says, I'm gonna be very curious.
Right. Yeah, this, it's a challenging little site to get folks in there safely, in and out safely. And we know that there's a lot of traffic around this site. Feel like the options that we have here are from Old Man's Trail, if we make that one way in or two directions. So we're still looking at that on the northwest side. The northeast entrance, we feel like that's the best way to keep that is two directions of traffic. Yeah.
The number 3 bus goes and takes right and goes down that way.
Yes.
And people right now fire out of there without stop. There's no stop sign, so they just come right out.
Yeah, we've honestly had to focus within the property lines, but just know that in the background, we are, looking at Old Man's Trail. We have lots of conversations about how is that going to impact the streets around, and we are basically in partnership looking at how that traffic flow is going to work and what the impact's going to be there. So I don't know that I can answer your question since we haven't done that study, but we know it's a concern.
There's 2 driveways coming out just at the entry area.
Yep.
Plus Pinion coming right down between those 2.
Mm-hmm.
So you block those off with people coming in and out of there, taking a left in and,
Yep.
you're gonna block El Paso Boulevard. So I'm concerned. Very.
Mm-hmm.
concerned. We'd be happy to chat with you after if you don't mind. That's fine.
Okay. Yes. Back to your. Did you have a question?
Yes. There's no way to get south except across no sidewalk.
Yes, I'm sorry. I totally forgot to repeat the first question, but this question was, comment that there's no pedestrian access on the east side of Old Man's Trail, and you can't get across. Let's see, could you go back maybe 3 slides to this one? Yeah. Okay.
So that's a great question. So is the traffic question. Old Man's Trail barely has a sidewalk on the west side. It's really more of a footpath. It's something the city's very well aware of because not only do we want to make the appropriate mobility connections there at Hiawatha, we're also working on the Creek Walk Trail coming up along Manitou Avenue. And the Creek Walk Trail, if it doesn't interact with Hiawatha and Hiawatha doesn't interact with Creek Walk Trail, neither system works as well, or we're putting people on the Old Man's Trail Bridge. We've got buses, traffic. It's not a great connection. So we are looking at several ideas. These are just ideas. Okay, this isn't necessarily but there is an idea to do a pedestrian bridge from behind the Chase Bank over the creek to Hiawatha. That has its own challenges, but we very much recognize that without that real big pedestrian connection, neither works as well. So just know we're looking at that. We've had some brainstorming. CDOT controls Manitou Avenue and how it interacts at that point with Old Man's Trail. We were looking at maybe trying to do some improvements to that intersection, but it has to go through CDOT's approval. Old Man's Trail Bridge is historic. It can't just be widened or enhanced. So that's a big challenge that we're concerned about. For tonight's meeting, We kind of are just wanting to kind of do, kind of a placeholder that we recognize that we don't have this connection clearly identified, but it's absolutely a priority for us. But it doesn't need to necessarily stop the improvement and development of this, because this will take a while too. There's complications. And then speaking of taking a while, something else that would be helpful if you guys are all in the back of your mind thinking about is that this doesn't all have to be built at once. In fact, if we've learned anything in Manitou, like it's probably good for us to phase things, not take on too much. And so, there's been talk internally. I'm in front of the camera. Oh, okay. There's been talk about, I think we all could agree that like the bathrooms, for example, would be a high priority. Get the bathrooms built, get them identified where we want them. Then we can get the porta potties out of there. Then we're offering kind of a reliable, non porta potty experience. So things like that. So those are kind of things that we're thinking about. We don't have to bite everything off and try to build it all at once. Things get complicated quickly. We can phase this work to do bits and pieces that are appropriate to the site, that are still in alignment with the master plan, that are offering immediate benefit to the community and our visitors to the parking lot. Okay, I hope I answered your creek walk or your pedestrian question. Sure. Okay, I'll stay up here, and if it's a question for Jennifer, then that's great. Do you want to?
So this represents a significant investment for the community. It sits on the banks of a creek that likes to flood. What kind of mitigations have been put together for this plan to account for flooding in Fountain Creek? Are we looking at a 50-year flood, 100-year flood? What is prepared for this plan?
You always have to look at a 100-year flood at a minimum. Oh, the question was, we are in a floodplain. Fair. What do we do about that? So I do want to point out that that building has been in a floodplain since 1890. And the building's actually on stilts. It's on stone columns. The columns are in great shape. So for all intents and purposes, that building has never flooded. So the floodplain through there does not really affect the building. Okay. There's a gap underneath. There's good cross slope. The flooding example that happened, I think in 2014, 2015, the inlets clogged up with hail, debris, flooded onto the parking lot. All of that to say, it's still in a flood insurance map and would require flood insurance to be done, or the city has the right to waive that requirement with certain liability and risks. But it is something that gets factored in. All of this stuff, though, if we had any stream bank impacts, which we might, would have to go through the floodplain administrator and that review. If it was significant enough, it could have to go through a LOMAR, which is a letter of map revision, which is where you actually revise the floodplain. I will tell you that the Old Man's Creek Bridge is a pinching, it's not really a floodplain term, but constricts the flow and causes that to back up. This is not really too much of a severe because the side slopes are so steep through there, they actually contain the flow quite a bit, which is probably also why the Hiawatha building doesn't have any real flood related damage. There's, I'm totally on a tangent, but the columns, we looked at them, there's no evidence of high water marks. That happens when water hits the area once or twice. There's no element of that. So just know it's being factored in, but fortunately where we are, it's not too much of a concern. And I don't think it's gonna be any kind of a deal breaker for what we do through here. Darlene?
In March, we talked about trash receptacles, dumpsters, trash trucks. I don't see any of this in this plan, and it'll have a bearing on the number of parking spaces and the turning radius in some of the parking lot.
So Darlene, you're right. We've talked about as a group, kind of two areas. And again, that's a detail that would need to be developed. We've talked about having it down here so that the trash truck could come down and back up. It's also kind of in the corner, and then it would be easy for people to, I don't know if you can see that, Darlene, down in this area potentially. So the trash truck could come in here and then make a backup maneuver and get to the receptacle. We also talked about having it maybe up in here somewhere. So it could, that'd be a harder maneuver, but I think we liked it kind of in a trash structure and protected with, the walls and the ballast, the bollards and the gate type thing. So it's not just used by everybody. That would be a problem with such a busy parking lot, is everyone want to throw their trash away. So we would need to be secured appropriately. Yes?
One, thank you all. And obviously this team has worked really hard to find out some really great thinking and planning. I think one of the things that I heard our table come up with is talking about community garden, more community space in this project. Something that came up, I think it's getting really reminded me of parking and things that we need to like to do. Is that considered? Would you see the parking, that's happening anymore? Those of us who live here and have kids, there's not a lot. We certainly have a couple of parks, but there's not a lot of. So we talked about the community garden, we talked about. Is this really addressing our community, or is this addressing?
So I think our answer to that would be yes.
It's addressing parking,
Well, you said two things.
right? So
Is it addressing community or is it addressing parking? And I said yes.
And I would say in part, the building does address that, but if you look at the format for it, and it's really not set up. I mean, like, if you think about the community gardens, it's one thing that's been on our mission for years. There is no community garden in this town. Tried it up with a class or what, I mean, there's just, I'm concerned that this is more of a thing. And I know it's a transportation hub, I'm just wondering, are we open to considering other ways to use this lane?
So a couple things, right? And okay, and by the way, the previous question was what about, they probably figured it out because I talked about trash receptacle. So it was about trash receptacles. This question is about, can we perhaps reduce some of the parking and improve or create some community garden amenity instead? Is that?
Yeah, and I think other ways to use it.
So we totally agree with the community space. Okay. So some of the thought is that this inside is obviously set up for community space to be defined how it wants to, our vision is that it's going to be used similar to this space. I mean, we've used Memorial Hall as an example of the things that go on in here. We think could then also happen in Hiawatha. Here's the big difference. This, right? Now, what if there were outlets in the ground and food trucks could park on the plaza and plug into the outlets and not have generators running, and you could go and have food trucks or something? What if you could have a, what's it called? We have a bunch of people selling stuff in tents. Farmers market. You can tell I don't go to farmers markets very often. What if it was set up where it was set up for farmers markets, right? And this was the community space to be defined, but it needs to be appropriately sized, have the right surface. We all know that like Memorial Park gets beat up for all the wine festival and the marathon because the grass just gets beat up weekend after weekend. What if we were able to shift some of those, the registration table, the water table? What if other things were shifted to this hard plaza? And I say hard, it's not a, but that was able to take some of that heavy load and take it off of Memorial Park. And then what if one weekend you used half Memorial Park, another weekend you used the other half? And so we've kind of reduced our wear and tear on that park by half, so to speak. So
I guess the question I want to know is, are we open to want to use that whole space for parking? I just heard other that.
like the whole parking lot area.
Had some other ideas how to use that. I think there is, if that was considered. But I think, first of all, we're at time. Second of all, I don't know if you have a chance to read any of the report, but that will help in understanding what feedback we got and how that got to this design.
Yeah, because people would like more parking. So we felt like this was a good compromise and a good balance between the two expectations. To answer your question. Okay, any other questions? Yeah, Corey.
Clarification, so, looks like there isn't a sidewalk or south side. Right now, it doesn't show where we're tweaking, so I see there's. Keep going, yeah, sorry, west. Keep going.
Oh, west.
Can you go straight through west? There's 20 seated spots in the covered breezeway. And I'm wondering if that is envisioned as the way that people can walk or bike through while people are also still sitting.
I think it would depend on how the space got utilized. Okay, the question is, and actually, would you mind going back like 5 slides to the architectural drawing real quick? Was it forward? Okay, go back. Sorry, musical slides. Nope, forward. There we go. Okay, so you can see there on the right side, this is Corey, I think this is the area you're referring to, this space. And for anyone that did the intern, like when we actually met in Hiawatha and we gave the tours and there was the metal beam in the ceiling, remember that spot? That metal beam is right here. That's that spot, as an FYI to get your bearing. So Corey's question is this area here going to be like a thoroughfare walkway? And I think the answer is it could be. Maybe there's a little fence that gets closed if there's an event. I mean, I think it totally could be. It would really help with, and then would you mind going back to where we were? Thanks. I think if it was accessible through both ways, it would help connectivity to both sides of the site as well. So if you park, you don't have to walk all the way around type thing. Yeah, I think it could be, Corey. Okay, 5 minutes over. No more questions.
Just to answer that question a little bit more, thanks. So the beam that Joel was talking about is actually, it's actually down here at the end of that patio. So we'd be under the existing roof, but there is room for, these are just like four seat tables, but then you do have circulation space. I'd say probably you should have a dismount zone there. I don't know that you want bikes running through there, but more for folks gathering in that area. But then just to reiterate, this portion of the site, we've left a little generic, but the Creek Walk Trail project that's proposed, we do have a version of that we've left space for right here, so that, it comes along Manitou Avenue. And then the version that we have been coordinating with does have a bridge here. So our thought is that, especially with leaving the plaza and not pursuing the options that had a vehicle entrance here, we feel like this is the safer of the option on this site, that bikes can come through the site here and then come over to Memorial Park or onto El Paso Boulevard. So that's the bike connection that we see, also pedestrian connection that we're still allowing for. But, as y'all know, lots of projects in progress. So we'll continue to coordinate that. But that's why our bike services right now are shown on this side of the site, is thinking that if pedestrians come over here, bike racks, bike lockers, but then also like around the shuttle stops, we've got a couple more right now, just as a preliminary breaking up of that plaza. Any other questions, or we're ready? Susan's closing us out.
I think it's time that we stop talking and you start talking. So we need to hear what you think about all this. So what we're proposing for tonight is in your small groups. And if there are 2 of you who want to join another group, or 1 of you who wants to join another group, please do. You have a purple sheet on your table. Each person should have one. And we'd like for you to hear various perspectives on this plan before you fill out your individual response form. So what we're asking you to do is, in your groups, discuss these 3 questions. What do you particularly like about the draft preferred plan? Just talk about it as a group. Talk about what each one of you likes. Is there any element of this draft preferred plan that really concerns you, and why? Always talk about the why. What do you like and why? And what are you concerned about and why? So talk about those 2 questions. And then the third question we would like for you to think about and discuss among yourselves is, and Dole referred to this, it's quite likely, given the financial constraints facing the city always, we're going to have to do this project in phases. So we can't afford to do it all at once. likely. So which phase would you do first? And we've listed some elements that you can think about, such as, mobility elements are really important to me. I want those first. Or as Dole said, maybe it makes sense to build the restrooms first. I don't know. We just want to know if we have to make hard decisions about phasing, what are your priorities? So we can keep those in mind as we're looking at phasing. So spend, I don't know, 20 minutes, whatever, discussing these 3 questions as a group. And then after you've had a good discussion, please individually, each one of you fill out one of these purple forms, if you would. And so we'll check in with you and see how you're doing, but have a good discussion. And with the Zoom folks, we'll do a separate discussion on the laptop because we've got people in a Zoom meeting. So we'll do that and then we'll bring everybody together. Thanks. Okay, is everybody finished with your individual response forms pretty much? Okay, and you promise you'll leave them here with us? You won't take them with you? Okay, and the Zoom people are gonna fill out their individual response form and email them in to Emily. So that's how we'll cover that. But we want to collect your purple forms tonight. And with that, I'll be quiet and Dole will close us out at this meeting.
Okay, everyone. Well, thank you for coming, for your questions. I hope you see how much time and energy has gone into this. I do want to highlight again that the task force has absolutely been critical. We were meeting at one point every single week, and now we meet every other week. So, I mean, when I say hundreds, maybe it's thousands of hours that the community has volunteered for this. So it really has been collaborative. I hope you can get the sense of that in this, that we're trying to gather the community engagement. I got asked several questions tonight, and I think those questions expose the challenge of doing a project like this. Is you have a lot of different customers with differing needs and demands, and trying to balance all of those is why projects can take a long time and be challenging to do. So hopefully you see our progress. And without further ado, thank you for coming. If you also hang around if you have specific questions, but thanks a lot, and please give us the forms. Well, I kind of went over this in the blue triangle one, but this is what I went over in the blue pyramid, upside down pyramid thing. These are our next steps. You can see it. We're hoping to take a preferred plan to council as soon as practical, based on the feedback from tonight. Okay, thank you.